good afternoon. Our class today, we have been talking about the various cities of Delhi, and we have reached the time of the Mughals. The last we spoke was of Tughlaqabad, which was a very, very important settlement made by Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. And today, what we are going to talk about is Shaha Jahanabad, which was made by Shaha Jahan. Uh, this basically comprises the part of Delhi which we generally know as people living in Delhi call as Old Delhi. तो जिसको दिल्ली के रहने वाले अब पुरानी दिल्ली बोलते हैं, ये वही जगह है जो शाहजहां ने बनवाई थी. Large part of it was constructed during the reign of Shah Jahan, and we are going to talk about the entire city which Shah Jahan gets constructed, and also within the city, the palace of the rulers where they used to live. And what we are going to majorly talk about in today's class is how the structure, how the structure of the palace, of the Shaha Jahanabad itself, the way it was so grand, it was so huge, represents the imperial ideology, the ideology of the people who were ruling over India at that time. So ये उनकी मानसिकता को कैसे दर्शाता है, it how, और इतने ग्रैंड स्ट्रक्चर बनाने का जो इतने इम्पोजिंग लगे, इतने बड़े बड़े लगे, तो इन स्ट्रक्चर्स को बनाने के पीछे क्या उनकी मंशा थी? Yes, they were definitely, places of residence. They were forts which would protect the city and its inhabitants from foreign attacks, etc. But what more do these buildings tell us is what we are going to talk about in today's class. We started a little early and just waiting for more people to join, and then we'll start in a couple of minutes. Okay, I think we can start now. It's 2 o'clock, and so as I was telling that, in today's class we have to talk about. I will be talking about the construction of this capital city by the Mughal rulers, specifically by Shah Jahan, and how Delhi is once again made the capital. So, Mughal dynasty is established in India around 526 AD by Babur, and during the time period, before Shah Jahan, there were several other Mughal rulers. There was Babur, there was Humayun, there was Akbar, and then Jahangir, and then Shah Jahan. So before Shah Jahan comes to power, as far as the Mughals are concerned, Delhi did not really have that importance as far as the capital cities of these Mughal rulers were concerned. So mostly the capitals is Agra. Partly it was also Lahore, and also Akbar gets this new capital constructed known as Fatehpur Sikri, which is on the route from Agra to Ajmer Sharif, which was the dargah of Moinuddin Chishti, which Akbar was a big he was a follower, and he believed in the powers of the Sufi saint Moinuddin Chishti, and so the Mughals have very closely related to the Chishti Silsila, and before this there is another important topic which we haven't really covered, is the Nizamuddin Dargah in Delhi, and Humayun's tomb. The fact that Humayun's tomb is very, very closely constructed to the Dargah of Nizamuddin Aulia, and this was in accordance with the personal wishes of Humayun itself. So Delhi, which was very, very important, right from the 11th, 12th century, from the time of Lal Kot. We have spoken about the various cities. We have spoken about Kila Rai Pithoda, and then we spoke about the Sheher or the Qutb Delhi, where Quwwatul Islam Mosque was set up and Qutub Minar was constructed. So all this is happening in the earlier Delhi, which we used to call as Old Delhi. And after that, there is the development of Ghiaspur, then there is New Sheher, which is Kilokhari, then there is Siri, which comes under Alauddin Khilji, and then after that, the Ghiasuddin Tughlaq constructs Tughlaqabad, and his son tries to get built a huge structure known as Jahapana, which would include most parts of this Delhi. And then later, very important development of a city in Delhi was Firozabad, which is Firoz Shah Kotla's Delhi. Firoz Shah and his Delhi, and how he undertakes a lot of renovation of the previous structures which are there. So the center position which Delhi occupied under the sultans, under the Delhi Sultanate, in a way declines when the Mughals come to power, because Delhi is not chosen as the capital, as the space where the capital will be constructed by the Mughal rulers, by the initial rulers of the Mughal dynasty. So their chosen cities were Agra for most of it, and then it was Lahore, and also Fatehpur Sikri, as I was talking about during the time period of Akbar. Delhi remains the capital before Shah Jahan for a very, very little time, from 8 to 10 years, but is not that important, is not that significant. So Delhi lost its glory. Obviously, when the seat of power is shifted to a different region, what goes along with it are the opportunities for trade, opportunities for commerce, and also if a particular city is the residence of a particular ruler and the ruling dynasty, the monarch, the sultan, etc., and the sultan or the monarch is going to have a huge, are going to have aristocracy, they are going to have nobles which are going to be under them, and both this royal household of the sultan and of the nobles are going to demand certain commodities which are going to be luxurious commodities, mostly, and also commodities of everyday use. And this helps in the development of the commerce, of trade within the city. Now, because Delhi ceased to be the capital, and the capital of the Mughals is moved to Agra and Lahore and Fatehpur Sikri, whatever, uh, Delhi lost its importance in that sense. It was the trade, the commerce which was going on earlier declined drastically. And then again, what happens at Shah Jahan in 1639, 1638 decides that, he's going to get this, he's going to move the capital, and he decides on the construction of this capital, which is close to the other regions of Delhi, which is, so he decides that he's going to make Delhi as his capital. So a decision which Shah Jahan takes, and that is why this Delhi is known as Shaha Jahanabad. तो इसीलिए इस दिल्ली को शाहजहानाबाद कहते हैं. हम लोग अब जो दिल्ली के लोग हैं इसको पुरानी दिल्ली कहते हैं, पर उस समय पे ये शाहजहानाबाद थी. And another thing, while doing the Sheher and the Qutb Delhi etc., I told you कि वो जो दिल्ली है, वो जो किला था, जो किला राय पिथौरा था, वो लाल किला था. दैट वाज द रेड फोर्ट, द ओरिजिनल रेड फोर्ट. और अब जब हम जिसको हम लाल किला कहते हैं, उसका नाम लाल किला नहीं था उस टाइम. द कंटेम्पररी पीपल कॉल्ड इट किलाए मुबारक. किला मुबारक उसका नाम था. So something which gets a lot of good fortune, or which is good. So that was the name of this fort that we now call as Lal Kila. तो किला मुबारक. और तो इसी के बारे में बात करनी है, शाहजहानाबाद और किला मुबारक के बारे में. शाहजहानाबाद और किला मुबारक, और दिल्ली जो है जब दोबारा से कैपिटल बनता है शाहजहां के अंडर, तो उसमें क्या-क्या चेंजेस आते हैं, वो जो पूरा that it brings back the trade, it brings back the nobility, it brings back that demand of luxurious commodities, which is once again going to come up, and that is why once again there is going to be development of trade and commerce, etc. in Delhi. So the position of Delhi is going to increase, is going to improve once again when it becomes the capital of the Mughal Empire, known as a capital known as Shaha Jahanabad. And this prestige, more or less continues for uh, almost 200 years. And though the Mughal Empire declines, but Delhi remains the center of power. Delhi remains the place where the Mughal family will be housed. So it remains the residence of the imperial household. And after that, what happens is the revolt of 1857, in which Delhi, and even before that, there is Nadir Shah's invasion, etc. So Delhi is being attacked, and a lot of jewels and etc. from Delhi are taken away. So it is going through go through that phase also, but ultimately its participation in the revolt of the Bahadur Shah Zafar's participation in the revolt of 1857, and the ruckus which is created during the revolt, that is going to largely affect the capital, the Delhi. And so this is all that we are going to do in later classes. So what we are today concerned about is Shah Jahan. What we are today concerned about is Qila Mubarak, and how it represented that imperial vision of the capital of the Mughals, that they want to uh, why is it, or how can we understand on the basis of their architecture or the way they constructed Shah Jahanabad, what the Mughal rulers were like. And it is very important, while we are talking about the construction of Shah Jahanabad, and Qila Mubarak is just one part of it. Shah Jahanabad जो है वो बहुत बड़ा है, वो पूरा पुरानी दिल्ली है, और लाल किला सिर्फ उसका एक पार्ट होने वाला है, किला मुबारक उसका सिर्फ एक पार्ट होने वाला है. And so this capital is constructed by Shah Jahan between 1639 to 1648. So almost 10 years, there is this construction which is going on. Why, first of all, why is the site of Delhi chosen? क्योंकि वो जो दिल्ली को क्यों चुना गया कैपिटल सिटी बनाने के लिए? Why was it chosen? So again, talking about the geographical advantages, Delhi mein, there was Yamuna River, and so that provided the navigation. It could be used for transportation, for commerce, for movement of troops, etc. And there were Aravalis in Delhi, which in a way controlled the Yamuna River. So जो Yamuna है, जो जिसमें which has the capacity, any river has the capacity कि जब अब भी जब दिल्ली में बारिश बहुत ज्यादा आ जाती है, या उत्तर भारत में बारिश बहुत ज्यादा आती है, तो यमुना नदी में बाढ़ आ जाती है. Many of the low lying areas, they get they are flooded because of that. But more or less, it was the populations around Yamuna were less vulnerable in Delhi because of the presence of Aravalis. And Aravalis, in this sense, they control the river Yamuna by not allowing it to spread, spread majorly. तो अरावली रेंजेस जो है जो दिल्ली की, वो रिवर यमुना को कंट्रोल करती हैं. ऑल्सो दिस इज द बिगिनिंग ऑफ द this is the part of the alluvial soil, जहां पर जिस एरिया को वो चूज करते हैं उसके एक साइड में रिज है, एक साइड में यमुना है, यहाँ पे अरावलीज हैं. सो दिल्ली वाज इन दैट सेंस had the capacity for being constructed into the next capital of the Mughals. Also, for the construction, you need stones. So Delhi, because it has Aravalis, so the rocks could come, the stone could come from the stone quarries. The water was available from Yamuna, and also the fact that there were heights. I mean, there were Aravalis and heights, and even within the Shaha Jahanabad, जहाँ पे अब जहाँ पर अब जामा मस्जिद है, जो कि शाहजहानाबाद में लाल किले के साउथ वेस्ट में पड़ता था, वहां पर भी हिल्स थी। तो उसी में से एक हिल पे, दो सेट ऑफ हिल से एक हिल पे आपका जामा मस्जिद बना। So it had that height also, which would give, which would be good for surveying, and good for vigilance, and to look around if there were enemies which were approaching, etc. And it had water also, it had stone also, and it had that important, most importantly, that prestige of being that imperial city, कि जो 300 सालों तक, 300 साढ़े 300 400 सालों तक, whatever, Delhi had remained that important city of the ruling elite, जो rulers थे, जो दिल्ली के सुल्तान थे, जो रूल कर रहे थे, वो क्योंकि दिल्ली से रूल कर रहे थे, तो उसके एक अलग प्रेस्टीज भी थी as the imperial capital. And it was the capital for almost, like 300 years under the Mughal, under the Muslim rulers also. So not just under the Tomars and the Chauhans, बट उसके बाद जब मुस्लिम रूलर्स ने, जब स्लेव डायनेस्टी एस्टैब्लिश हुआ, और उसके बाद खिलजीज एक्सेट्रा, तो उसके तब भी दिल्ली जो थी कैपिटल थी। तो उसका वो रेलेवेंस जो है दिल्ली का, वो it is going to remain there, and that is why it was chosen. Now another very important thing which we must keep in mind is the nature of the Mughal state. क्योंकि हम शाहजहानाबाद की बात कर रहे हैं, हम लाल किले की बात कर रहे हैं, तो हमारे लिए एक बहुत जरूरी बात करना है, it is very important for us to understand that what was the nature of the Mughal state, the how did they rule, what was their own perception about themselves, um, and that, because that perception is going to get reflected in the in what they are going to construct. तो जो construction होगा, जो दिल्ली इमर्ज होगा, उनका जो परसेप्शन था, वो उसमें निकल के आएगा. Why? Because Shahjahan is extremely involved. He is extremely involved in the construction of Shahjahanabad. वो सारे plans देखते हैं, and he is not just doing it here. Even otherwise, Shahjahan was extremely involved in any architectural plan, and he would be viewing and reviewing the work which is done, and people who were good at architecture, they were they were rewarded for if they did something else. So Shah Jahan is definitely going to be important as far as Shah Jahanabad is concerned, because he's the one who orders the moving of the capital from Agra to Delhi. And also, it is very interesting. Why? Because Shah Jahan was deeply, madly in love with his wife Mumtaz Mahal, and and he chooses. Taj Mahal was constructed in Agra and not in Delhi. So what happens, that after the construction of Taj Mahal, he moves his capital and he leaves Agra and comes to Delhi. Uh, so I was saying that it is important for us to understand the nature of the Mughal state itself, to be able to understand, um, what is it that this architecture is going to tell us. Because the one very important view with respect to the nature of the Mughal state is that it was a patrimonial bureaucratic state. There was huge bureaucracy, though there are, people who have objected. There are scholars, historians who have objected to this idea of using the term bureaucracy for the Mughal time period, because bureaucracy is something that emerges much later during the British, maybe, and it's a modern concept, maybe. But anyhow, Stephen Blake calls it the patrimonial, bureaucratic empire, and this patrimonial bureaucratic empire means that there is this huge, the empire is being governed by this huge bureaucracy, the nobles, etc., which are there, who are almost in a patrimonial relationship with the ruler. So the ruler, the Mughal emperor, is almost like a father figure to these nobles which are there, and this is what characterizes the Mughal state. जो जो राजा है वो उस एकदम पिता की तरह, it is like the father and the nobles, who the huge, to the huge bureaucracy which is there at that time. And this, patrimonial bureaucratic strait is dominating every aspect of life. It is dominating the society, it is dominating the economy, it is dominating definitely the politics, etc. And it also dominates culture. In the next class we will be talking about culture. It also dominates culture, it dominates art, etc. So if you look at the Mughal paintings, for that example, the emperor, in most Mughal painting, the emperor is at the center. It is not that the emperor would be shown in one corner. The idea with which the Mughals are ruling is that we are the center of the world. The emperor is the center of the world. The emperor is God sent. Emperor has relations, is has the entire divine right to rule. That the right to rule the masses has been given to the emperor by the divinity itself. So emperor is the most powerful thing during the Mughal Empire, during the Mughal dynasty. He is he has everything in his own hands. And though there are later debates which question the centralization of the Mughal Empire, how centralized was the Mughal Empire, but nonetheless, emperor was very, very important. And so just like the sovereign, the ruler was the center of this entire, of this entire apparatus which was being created to govern India. Similarly, the capital city, the sovereign capital, was the center of attention center. It was the place which was the seat of power. So we need to understand what do we mean by by the capital. से वैसे बोला capital change हो रही थी. It is so easy, कि हाँ तो capital आई, अगली dynasty आई, capital change कर ली. पर एक capital बनने का मतलब क्या होता है? What is this prestige of the central government being in Delhi or governing India from Delhi? And similarly, if you go back in time, what was this prestige of Delhi? So जो दिल्ली था, it was almost like a patrimonial household. वो बिल्कुल एक ऐसा था, एक बड़े घर की तरह था. नॉट जस्ट द पैलेस इटसेल्फ, जो पैलेस है सिर्फ वही नहीं, क्योंकि पैलेस में तो डेफिनेटली राजा है और उसकी एक्सटेंडेड एम्परर, शहंशाह है, बादशाह है और उसकी एक्सटेंडेड फैमिली है. एंड बट इवन बियॉन्ड दैट, तो वो जो शहंशाह है वो अपने नोबल्स को, ब्यूरोक्रेट्स को भी ऐसे ही रखता है जैसे वो उनके उनके बीच में भी ऐसा ही रिलेशन है जैसे पिता और पुत्र के बीच में होता है. सो देयर इज दिस patrimonial relationship there, and even those nobles have the same kind of relationship with the others in their empire. So there is this the patrimonial relationship between the emperor and the nobles, and the nobles and the other sections of the society. And this entire capital, the sovereign city, the Delhi, seems like uh, an extended household of the rulers. बस राजा का घर है तो इसलिए इंपॉर्टेंट है. और सिटीज बहुत सारी वजह से इंपॉर्टेंट हो सकती हैं. सारी सिटीज इसलिए इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं होती थी क्योंकि राजा का घर होता था. ठीक है, जब हमने बात की थी सिरी की, वी स्पोक अबाउट हाउ सिरी वाज द कैपिटल, दैट इज वेयर द पैलेस ऑफ अलाउद्दीन खिलजी इज गोइंग टू बी. बट शहर और कुतुब दिल्ली रिमेन इंपॉर्टेंट. तो सिर्फ राजा के घर होने से सिटी अपने आप इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं हो जाती. और बहुत सारी ऐसी सिटीज थी जो which were not the capital, which were not the place of residence of the ruling rulers, but they were still important. For example, if there was some city which was religiously important, let's say Mecca, Medina, or Varanasi. So अगर कोई city जो है वो religion की वजह से important है, तो वो उसी वजह से important होगी. वो इसलिए नहीं होगी कि कि राजा का घर है, उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता वहां पे कि है या नहीं है. So Delhi ki jo importance थी, it was just like other cities of the world at that time, cities like Istanbul, cities like Tokyo, which was known as Edo. तो जहां पर जो dynasty है वो उसका राजा रहता है. Peking, which is going to where the ruler is going to live, the Manchus ruler, the King dynasty ruler is going to live. तो ऐसे ही दिल्ली भी इसीलिए important थी क्योंकि यहाँ पर राजा जो था, जो शहंशाह था, उसका घर था. So that was important. And if we look at the entire structure of Delhi, it was almost like it was a palace. It was a palace fortress. Delhi was a palace fortress. It was all about this imperial palace which was there, जो लाल किला था, और जो जो फोर्ट्स उसके आसपास जो बनाए गए, जो दीवारें बनाई गई, जिसमें बहुत सारे दरवाजे थे, जिसमें अभी वी आर फेमिलियर विद सम ऑफ अस, मस्ट बी, I believe most of us would be familiar with the names like Kashmiri Gate and Delhi Gate and Lahori Gate and Turkman Gate and Akbarabadi Gate. तो अब नहीं सुना है हमने, बट ये सारे जो गेट्स हैं ये अभी भी पुरानी दिल्ली में हैं. तो those of you who are familiar with old Delhi would be aware about these names in that part of Delhi. Okay, so Delhi is important. There is symbolic importance of Delhi. That is why it is chosen for being the capital of the Mughal Empire. And the fact that I said that there is this relationship between the Mughal Empire emperor and the nobles, and then their own set of people, their own extended family, their own servants, etc. So there is also the relationship which we call as the patron-client relationship. That there is a patron, and then and then he has a client. So patron-client relationship जो है उस सेंस में ये पूरे जो थे एक हायरार्की में एक they were all part of this one hierarchy. Now the nobles who are going to live in Delhi, जब दिल्ली का शाहजहानाबाद का कंस्ट्रक्शन होगा, तो जब डिसाइड किया जाएगा कि यहाँ पर एक नई कैपिटल जो है वो बनाई जा रही है, so there all these important princes and the important the nobles will be given plots of lands. They will be given demarcated area so that they may come up with their own mansions, ताकि ये जो है अपने जो घर है, अपने जो mansions है, अपनी हवेलियां जो हैं ये खुद बनवा सकें. और ये जो बहुत सारे जो nobles से princes थे, they had huge amount of money, and the fact that they're going to get it constructed because जैसे सिर्फ राजा का घर नहीं होने वाला है, राजा की जो important वाली प्रजा है, the nobility is also going to live in Delhi, and this nobility is also going to depending on the competition between the nobles, and depending on and also making a bigger and an elaborate mansion or a structure or a house was also a matter of symbol, a status symbol. तो ये इन्हीं सब के जो मैंशन थे, पैलेसेस थे, जो नोबिलिटी है, उनके भी ये सब दिल्ली के अंदर उनको जगह दी जाएगी कि आप ये सब बनाइए, और ये सब बनाया जाएगा. And how do we there is a European traveler called Bernier, जो French traveler थे Bernier. He comes to India at this time, and he is otherwise he's deeply critical of the Mughal dynasty, saying that how every power is in the hand of the sovereign or the ruler, whom he called as a despot. But he also looks at Delhi, and he says that Delhi is the biggest city and the most elaborate city in the east, definitely, and probably even in the even in the entire world. And Delhi stood that Delhi took on that image of being the status of being powerful, the status of being wealthy. तो दिल्ली के साथ ये जो टर्म्स हैं, ये जो सेंस है, जो सिंबल है, वो अटैच हो गए थे कि पावर एंड स्ट्रेंथ एंड वेल्थ, all of this is what Delhi came to represent. And Shah Jahanabad, definitely, had to reflect this power. जितनी अगर जो मुगल डायनेस्टी है वो चाहती है कि वो अपनी पावर को डिस्प्ले करें, और अगर वो अपनी कैपिटल बनवा रहे हैं, देयर दैट पावर एंड वेल्थ एंड एवरीथिंग should be reflected in the architecture which is coming up at that time. And now we have the construction of Ram Mandir in Ayodhya, which is going on. We have the Central Vista project की जो Lieutenant Delhi में आ रहा है कि जहां पर पार्लियामेंट और उसके बाकी के स्ट्रक्चर्स को दोबारा से बनाया जाएगा, etc. So whatever structures come up at any point of time, they represent the vision of those who are making it. And just the way, the Mughals believe that they are the center of the power, the center of the world, the center of the power. तो उनकी वो सारी आइडियोलॉजी, उनका वेल्थ, उनका सिंबल, उनका स्टेटस जो था, सब कुछ वो इस दिल्ली में दिखना था जो वो कैपिटल बना रहे थे. इट्स वेरी कॉमन आइडिया, हम घर भी बनाने लगते हैं तो सब कुछ, we try and put in our all the effort in that making of that house, that बहुत आलीशान बनना चाहिए, वो स्टेटस का मैटर आ जाता है. And as I said, that Shah Jahan himself has always been interested in agricultural, in not agriculture, in architectural plans. In architecture, he was interested, and there is a historian, a contemporary historian. His name is Muhammad Salih Kambu. Salih tells us that how Shah Jahan used to review certain projects and designs, and he would look at the buildings which were under construction even in Agra. तो जब वो दिल्ली आने से पहले भी, and शाहजहां is a ruler जिनके अंदर ताजमहल भी बन रहा है, जिनके अंदर शाहजहानाबाद भी बन रहा है, लाल किला बन रहा है, जामा मस्जिद बन रहा है. So बहुत सारी कंस्ट्रक्शन एक्टिविटी जो हम मुगल्स के साथ एसोसिएट करते हैं, वो most of it is under Shah Jahan only, and this reflects that he is definitely interested uh, in architecture. In 1639, when he decided to make this new capital, it was not just for the reason that he wanted to, make a different statement about himself, about his power from his predecessors. It was also about the conditions which were coming up in Agra at that time, because Agra was the capital and the population of Agra was increasing. Agra, because there were no hills around Agra, so the Yamuna would flood quite often. There was soil erosion which was happening. So there were problems which are coming up in Agra itself. And Agra had very little scope of expansion. तो उसमें वो भी दिक्कत थी. Not just कि दिल्ली का अपनी prestige है, दिल्ली का, all that is there, why Delhi would have been chosen, all those reasons are there, but originally the capital was Agra. So why, आगरा के साथ अपनी परेशानियां थी, वहां पर soil erosion हो रहा था, वहां पर population बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ रही थी, etc. So that this is the time, when Shah Jahan asks people to come up with suggestions that which city should be made the capital, and he asks astrologers, he asks architects, planners, etc. कि कौन से शहर को जो है वो capital बनाया जाए, and that is the time wherein the name of this when the name of Delhi is being suggested. And the capital, जैसे जो बादशाह है, वो भगवान और प्रजा के बीच में, between the divinity and between the common population, that is the link. It is the emperor is almost has got a divine right to rule over all of you, all of us. The image which was being made, the perception which was created. The capital also has to represent the same perception. So it is that the capital has to be a place between the earth and the heaven. स्वर्ग के बाद अगर धरती पे कोई दूसरी जगह है जो स्वर्ग के बराबर है, it has to be the capital, the capital city. And because the Mughal Empire is powerful, they have the money, they have the wealth, the capital has to showcase all of this. It has to showcase the significance. The capital is significant because of the idea that it is symbolic of what the dynasty is all about. Okay, so this is when the architects and the planners and astrologers, they suggest the name of Delhi, that Delhi can serve as an important as an important Delhi can serve as a place wherein we can build a new capital. Now the as far as the plan of construction of Delhi was concerned, जो शाहजहानाबाद बनाया गया, जो पूरी एक पूरा जो शहर पूरा का पूरा जो बसाया गया, it was in a way resembled जो उस टाइम पे सफाविद डायनेस्टी थी ईरान में. वहां के जो सफाविद डायनेस्टी थी ईरान की, वहां की जो कैपिटल थी इस्फहान, उसको रिफ्लेक्ट करता था to some extent. But there were many things in Delhi which came up at that time, like the Central Boulevard, जो हमारा जो रेड फोर्ट के सामने वाली रोड है, the Central Boulevard. It was much prior to such boulevards started coming up in France, in Germany. France और जर्मनी में जो इस तरह की बड़ी बड़ी रोड्स और लंबी लंबी रोड्स, इनके दोनों तरफ जो है वो मार्केट प्लेसेस होंगी एक्सेट्रा, घर होंगे, हवेलियां होंगी. सो इस तरीके की जो प्लेसेस हैं वो यूरोप में लगभग 100 साल के बाद आएंगी. So Delhi was much ahead of them in that sense, that in terms of how it was being planned. Now, who were the main architects of Delhi? There were two main architects of Delhi. One was Ustad Ahmad and the other one was Ustad Hamid. तो ये दोनों जो हैं ये चीफ आर्किटेक्ट्स हैं जो कि दिल्ली को प्लान करेंगे. Obviously, Shahjahan's own daughter Jahanara was also involved. In Jahanara very much involved in the construction of Shaha Jahanabad, reviewing the work which is done, designing the marketplaces, etc. But the chief architects were Hamid and Ustad Hamid and Ustad Ahmad. And also there were other, as I said that there were other number of other governors or people who were given the charge of looking after the work which had to be done, and these were Alawardi Khan, Makramat Khan, and Gairat Khan. Alawardi Khan, Makramat Khan, and Gairat Khan were the Subedars who were given the work to supervise the construction activity which is happening in Delhi. And the historian that we have spoken about previously, Muhammad Salih, is Kambo, is talking about how great is this city which is being constructed. It is greater than Constantinople. It is greater than Baghdad. It is greater than. It has all the amenities which the best of the cities of the world have. So as I said that the architectural details which are there, the boulevard which is there, which in Shah Jahanabad, comes much before such boulevard starts coming in Europe, in France. तो वो जो वहां पर फ्रांस में तो वो 1670 में आते हैं और जर्मनी में तो 1740 में आते हैं. यहाँ पर तो 1640s में ही आ गए हैं. द चांदनी चौक वाला जो बुलेवार्ड है, it comes much earlier. As far as the planning of the city of Shah Jahanabad was concerned, it reflected both it as if it was taken from the Hindu architectural patterns and also the Islamic architectural patterns. Hindu architectural patterns में जो city होती है उसमें जो crossroads होती हैं, जो main वहाँ पर center में temple होता है. The ancient Hindu architectural, the ancient Hindu architectural book which is known as Manasar. Manasar के हिसाब से जो वो जहाँ सड़क intersect करेगी, this that design is known as a karmuka. तो ये जो karmuk है, that is important. And this and in the center was of this was supposed to be a temple according to this particular text. जो Manasar है उसके accordingly इसके center में एक मंदिर होना चाहिए. But in the case of Shaha Jahanabad, what we see is that the center space, which is supposed to be the most auspicious space, is not taken by a temple, it is taken by the palace. So again that link, जो डिवाइन के साथ लिंक है कि यहाँ पर मंदिर होना चाहिए, मंदिर की जगह वहां पे राजा का घर है, that is where the palace is located. So the selection of this Karmuk plan suggests that how powerful the king was. It was as powerful as God himself would have been. जो ये पूरा प्लान है ये इस्लामिक आर्किटेक्चर को भी रिप्रेजेंट करता है. जैसे इस्लामिक आर्किटेक्चर में मैन और यूनिवर्स की बात की गई है और कैसे जो सिटी है वो बात की गई है कि उस सिटी के अंदर जो है वो पूरी दुनिया ही बसी होती है. सो similarly जो शाहजहानाबाद है, everything was there within this every element of the world could be found in Shah Jahanabad itself, right from the riches to the trade to this and that, and especially when we are going to talk about the marketplaces. तो इतनी ज़्यादा elaborate, इतनी बड़ी, इतनी अच्छी marketplaces थी पुरानी दिल्ली की जो शाहजहानाबाद है उसकी, कि everything could be found within it. If we talk about the structure of the city, you know, there were on three sides there were fort walls, and on the fourth side there was partly a fort, and there was a wall, and you know, this entire structure, अभी तक हम पूरे पुरानी दिल्ली की बात कर रहे हैं, लाल किले की बात नहीं कर रहे, लाल किला, किला मुबारक, आई हैव स्पोकन अबाउट बीच बीच में कि कैसे वो जो है वो करमुख के सेंटर में है, जहां पर मंदिर होना चाहिए था वहां पे पैलेस है, because according to the Hindu architecture, ancient architectural text, so that is where Kila Mubarak is located. And we are going to talk about Kila Mubarak also, but this entire wall which is there is puri wall ka jo length hai, it is especially the the wall towards the west, it is 9 kilometers in length, और उसमें बहुत सारे towers हैं, और उन towers के भी पूरी walls हैं, बीच बीच में towers हैं which are meant for for people to be able to see if the enemy is approaching, etc. So there are 27 towers, and there are a number of gates which are there, and these gates are at regular intervals, mostly named after the direction in which the gates open. So if there was a gate which opened in direction towards Turkey, so that became the Turkman gate. If there was a gate which opened in the direction of Lahore, that became the Lahori gate. Similarly, the gate toward Kashmir came to be known as the Kashmiri gate, etc. Now, within this entire Shahjahanabad, princes को जगह मिल गई, nobles को जगह मिल गई, जहाँ पे उन्होंने अपने अपने mansions बना लिए. जो यमुना नदी है वो इसके पीछे है, that is behind the palace. The city is in the front of the Red Fort, and Yamuna is behind the Red Fort. And there are, Hindus specifically, have certain uh, they have certain rituals and ceremonies which they have to perform along with the river. For example, taking bath, taking the dip in the morning, maybe, or at least, or I mean, also the cremation of the dead bodies. So the Hindus were allowed, gates towards Yamuna, wherein they could go and perform and worship and do whatever. And there were regular posts which were chौकी, known as चौकी. So जैसे अब पुलिस पोस्ट होती है हमारे यहाँ पे, वो थी, और चौकियां थी, और आरामगाह था. So we are going to I'll briefly tell you what all small things were there, but definitely, as I was telling you earlier, there were two hills, and one of these hills is the Bhujalal पहाड़ी. एक पहाड़ी जो है जो रेड फोर्ट के सामने है, which is towards the southwest of the fortress, जो किला मुबारक के सामने है, that is the भुजालाल पहाड़ी जो है, वहां पर जो है वो जामी मस्जिद आएगी, what we known as the Jama Masjid. So this is towards the southwest of the fortress. Now, talking, very specifically about Kila Mubarak, as I said, that Bernier is going to say that it is perhaps the most, most pleasant, most, great, grand, magnificent structure which is found in the eastern part में. और Bernier जो है वो फ्रांस से आ रहे हैं, फ्रांस से, he is a traveler from France, and for him to be saying that the Kila Mubarak, or the palace जो है, Mubarak means something which is good, which is auspicious. So that is the name which is given to this, what we now call as the Kila Mubarak. One, it is huge. बहुत बड़ा है, emperor का घर है, not just the house of the owner of the emperor itself, but also it houses various other buildings, like various other structures, like there is going to be Diwan-e Khas, there is Diwan-e Aam, there are the Jharokhas, there is a market which is there. So a huge, palace, which almost 3 kilometers is the area, and within that there is the area of almost more than 100 एकड़ का जो एरिया है उसके अकॉर्डिंग, और इतना बड़ा था रेड फोर्ट कि जो लाल किले का फोर्ट, जो आगरा का जो लाल किला है उसके डबल था साइज में। एंड इट इज जो सिरी जो था हमारा अलाउद्दीन खिलजी वाला था वो सर्कुलर था, राइट। ये जो लाल किला है ये इट्स इन द शेप ऑफ अ पैरेललोग्राम, सो एक रेक्टेंगुलर सी शेप में है, पैरेललोग्राम की शेप में है, और जो वॉल्स हैं वो बहुत हाई है। यू मे हैव सीन, यू नो, इट्स ह्यूज, इट इज डिफिकल्ट टू मिस। अभी तो बहुत न्यूज में भी था बिकॉज ऑफ द अनफॉर्चुनेट इंसिडेंट मे बी ऑन 26 जनवरी। सो बहुत ज्यादा न्यूज में भी रहा। सो आई एम श्योर आप लोगों ने देखा होगा लाल किला। और जब इसका कंस्ट्रक्शन हुआ तो ऑब्वियसली इतने बड़े स्केल का टू बिल्ड अ फोर्ट ऑफ दिस ह्यूज scale, thousands of masons and thousands of carpenters and gardeners and craftsmen, etc. Gardens are very, very important. There are three important gardens which are going to separate this palace from the city: the Buland Garden, the Gulabi Bagh, एंड द अंगूरी बाग। तो ये जो तीनों बाग हैं, जो तीनों गार्डन्स हैं, बुलंद बाग, गुलाबी बाग एंड द अंगूरी बाग, ये इस फोर्ट को सिटी से, इस पैलेस को सिटी से अलग करेंगे, राइट। और ये जो पूरा पैलेस है इसके चारों तरफ जो है देयर इज गोइंग टू बी अ मोट, वो जो एक जो गड्ढा खुदा होता है जिसमें पानी भरा होता है, सो देयर इट इज ऑलमोस्ट गोइंग टू बी 10 feet, 9 to 10 feet in depth, and that is where water will be filled to give an extra sense of security and protection to the fort. So चारों तरफ जो है इसके तीनों तरफ तो एक मोट होगा लाल किले के, and the building was made extremely very strong because obviously the imperial household has to live there. And imperial family, the royal family, was not a small family. It is a huge family. It includes numerous wives and the concubines and the begums and the agas and the agachas and the slaves and the eunuchs and the khwaja saras and the people who would be guarding, people who would be protecting, people who would be cooking, people who would be the jewelers who would come, the traders who have come from different cities, and sell their produce to the royal family, visitors, so many princes, etc. And dependents of the previous ruler. So if once Akbar dies, and who the dependents of Akbar and after Jahangir has come into being, so ऐसे ऐसे जब शाहजहां के टाइम पे जो उनके पुराने जो रूलर्स थे उनके जो डिपेंडेंट्स है वो भी सब यहीं पे रहने वाले हैं। So it had to be a huge place, right? And it had to be not just huge because more people had to stay in, because it was the house, it was the palace of the emperor himself. Now, within this, the palace itself, there is a structure known as Naubat Khana. Naubat Khana is a place, and then there is Diwane Am. As I said, that Diwane Am is an important place within the structure. There is a marketplace, which is जो लाहौरी गेट है, वो उस तरफ से जो एंट्रेंस थी, वो चांदनी चौक की एंट्रेंस, वो वाली जो है वो मेन एंट्रेंस थी, अभी भी है लाहौरी गेट से। इफ यू go from Lal Killa towards the Fatehpuri Masjid, and from there towards Khadi Bauli, and that is where the Lahori gate is. तो वहाँ वो वाला जो पूरा चांदनी चौक वाला जो था एरिया, वो मेन एंट्रेंस था towards for this palace. And the buildings are well crafted. There is a greater use of marble, definitely. जो शाहजहानाबाद से पहले के जो स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं, शाहजहां की रेंज से पहले के जो स्ट्रक्चर हैं, उनमें सैंडस्टोन का यूज ज्यादा देखने को मिलता है। ड्यूरिंग द टाइम ऑफ शाहजहां देयर इज ग्रेटर यूज ऑफ मार्बल दैट वी सी, बट डेफिनेटली रेड फोर्ट इज मेड अप ऑफ रेड सैंडस्टोन। The fortress, जो ये पूरा लाल किला था, इसको it was divided into two parts. One was the domestic part, the harem part, where the household activities would be done and the private activities would be done, and one was for the engagement with public, in the sense the engagement with the nobles, etc. Towards the east of this of the palace was where the bazaar was located, और वहाँ पे kiosks थे जहाँ पर लोग आके अपनी चीजें जो थी वहाँ पर they used to sell. The structures which were there within the this palace were Qila Mubarak were places like Naubat Khana, I have told you. Then there is Rang Mahal. There is Diwane Am also, I have told you. Then there is Aram Gah. Aram Gah is a place which is used, basically for sleeping, the sleeping quarters. Then there is a place which I've told you for the dependents and the widows of those who are no longer there. And this place is known as Khawaspura. तो जो खवासपुरा है वो जगह है जहाँ पर जो विडोज और डिपेंडेंट्स हैं वो उन रूलर्स के अर्लियर नवाब के अर्लियर एम्परर्स के who are no longer there, who are no longer ruling. And apart from that, as I told you that it was the because it was the imperial residence, उसके अंदर कई सौ लोग जो होंगे, वो there would be hundred and thousands of people who would be there, who have to be there. Why? Because these people are cooks, these people are painters, and especially Mughals were very passionate about art and both art and architecture. So there are going to be painters, there are going to be musicians. Music was definitely very, very important within the Mughal court, something which Aurangzeb later objects to. And so all this is a part of the Qila Mubarak. And also the important thing was the Jharokha. Now Jharokha is a concept which is Jharokha Darshan as a concept was introduced by Akbar, which basically meant a platform or a balcony kind of a thing where the emperor would go so that the public could look at him, and people would come from distances near and far to have a look of the emperor. And they would because the emperor was considered almost the presence of God on the planet, and the diseased would come, and people who want who are expecting a birth, women who are expecting birth. So all kinds of people used to come for the Jharokha Darshan of the Mughal emperors, and the practice which is started by Akbar. Uh, okay, so I'll continue with this. If you have any questions, I can see that some of you have raised questions in the Q&A box. अगर और कोई सवाल हैं तो you must ask in the Q&A box. Okay, I'll respond to these questions. Okay, the construction, how Red Fort was completed in a Qila Mubarak was completed in about 7 years. शाह जहानाबाद जो है वो 1639 में बनना शुरू होता है, 1648 तक complete हो जाता है. Red Fort, within that the Red Fort only takes about seven years. Shaha Jahanabad, I just told you, I answered. Why did he choose Agra to build the Taj Mahal and not Delhi? Because that was done earlier. Delhi becomes the capital later. So because Agra was the capital of the Mughal Empire right from the time of Babur, yes, there are changes which happens, so the capital is briefly moved to other regions, to Lahore, to Fatehpur Sikri during the time period of Akbar. Akbar also moves the capital to Lahore briefly. Jahangir more or less remains in Lahore. So Delhi is not that important. The capital of the Mughals is most definitely, either Agra, mostly Agra, partly Lahore, partly, it remains the region of, mostly Agra, partly Lahore, and also Fatehpur Sikri during the time period of Akbar. So this that is why that is why it was chosen maybe and Delhi becomes the capital later because Agra has developed certain problems, certain issues, uh, which could not be tackled. It just give me one moment, and I'll be right back. Okay. So okay, I hope I'm on unmute. Okay. Um, as I said, that so Agra was the capital, even before the capital is moved to Delhi. Delhi was the capital of the Mughal Empire before Shah Jahan for very little while, not for a very long time. Again, Agra was chosen for the drawbacks, but say Agra could not be developed further it because these were the drawbacks. आगरा कैपिटल तो थी ही, उसको फर्दर डेवलप नहीं किया जा सकता था क्योंकि एक तो पॉपुलेशन बढ़ रही थी, इरोशन, सॉइल इरोशन था, और also Delhi's symbolic value and the grand level at which Shah Jahan wants to construct the at which he wants to construct the grandness of the fort which he wants would not have been a possibility in Agra. But please ask clear questions. I haven't really understood which there's a couple of you were asking. Um, Okay, yes, the WhatsApp group I'll share. You have to be careful about what you converse in the WhatsApp group because it gets difficult for me to keep the track of what is going on. इतने सारे मैसेज आते हैं तो फिर मैं देख नहीं पाता हूँ. तो आप प्लीज अपनी जो बातें हैं वो अगर unnecessary डिस्कशन नहीं करेंगे तो डेफिनेटली हमारा WhatsApp ग्रुप है. You can become part of it. I'll just share the link with you guys. Hmm. Any other question which you have? In the next class which we have whenever it is scheduled, we are going to talk about a little bit more about Kila Mubarak and about the commerce, the culture. मतलब अभी तो हम सिर्फ राजा और center of power and symbol and Delhi and how it represents power and how it represents it needs to represent that magnificence, it needs to represent that grandness and the huge construction and this and that. We were talking about such things. In the next class, we are going to talk about how Delhi was also emerged as a center of culture, as a center of cultural activities, as a center of um, of trade at that time. So that the Kila Mubarak discussion is not over. We are going to talk more about Kila Mubarak in the next class. Just give me one moment. I'll share the link with you. I've shared the link of the class with you. You can use the link to join the WhatsApp group. बट प्लीज बच्चे उसमें अननेसेसरी सवाल नहीं पूछेंगे. बट वो ग्रुप इसीलिए है कि मैं अपना मटेरियल्स जो है शेयर कर सकूं, कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन है आपके लिए तो वो दे सकूं. अगर क्लास रीशेड्यूल हो रही है, कैंसिल हो रही है, तो उसके बारे में बता सकूं. बट प्लीज यूज द ग्रुप ओनली फॉर दिस. नो फॉरवर्डेड मैसेजेस. और कोई चीज अगर एक बारी किसी एक बच्चे ने पूछ ली है तो उसको प्लीज बार बार एक ही सवाल ना पूछें. वेट करें, जब मेरे पास समय होगा मैं उसको देखकर जरूर जवाब दूंगा उसका. So please just wait for one person to, for somebody to answer that instead of 70 people, 80 people, 200 people asking the same question again and again. Okay, I have shared the group link with you. If any other question, please ask. um, I will look at the question once again. Books, bache, I can share the e-copies. The e-copies of the books are very big, like 50 MB, 70 MB, इतनी बड़ी बड़ी books हैं. आपका एसएल का मटेरियल है, इसके अलावा you can all go and download these books. I'll try and upload these books on the WhatsApp group. जो इम्पोर्टेंट बुक्स हैं, हमारे अलग अलग टॉपिक के लिए अलग अलग बुक्स इम्पोर्टेंट होती हैं, सो आई ट्राई एंड डाउन सेंड दोज बुक्स. समबडी हैज शेयर्ड आल्सो, पहले किसी ने किताबें शेयर करी हैं. So there is Frickenberg's edited book which is called as Delhi Through the Ages, जिसमें अलग अलग authors के chapters हैं. तो that book is quite good, you know, because it gives you a number of resources. जो हमने आज जो किला मुबारक के बारे में बात की है, इसमें स्टीफन ब्लेक के आर्टिकल्स हैं. हमीदा खातून नकवी, her work is there on what we were doing today. So so this you can look up Stephen Blake, I have told you, Hamida Khatun Naqvi, then Shaha Jahanabad. Your SL material is also quite good, you know, as far as this paper is concerned. It is very good material which is there. And स्टीफन ब्लेक, हमीदा खातून नकवी. अदरवाइज यू नो और कुछ मुझे याद आएगा, मैं कोई किताब अगर कोई अच्छी होगी तो आई विल शेयर इट इन द ग्रुप. एनी अदर क्वेश्चन प्लीज आस्क. But I have answered the question when the Red Fort was constructed. You have asked the same question several times. आप एक ही सवाल पूछ रहे हैं. मैंने बताया कि वो कब कंस्ट्रक्ट हुआ था. 1639 से हुआ था, and 1639 to 1648 is when it was constructed.